You know what's interesting? Right now, someone's probably expecting you to react, to snap back, to defend yourself, to prove them wrong. And you're sitting there, feeling that pull, that urge to speak, to explain, to justify. But here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. Your silence, it's not weakness, it's warfare. Let me tell you something Machiavelli understood 500 years ago. Something that politicians, strategists, and anyone who's ever held real power knows in their bones. The person who controls their response controls the entire situation. Think about it this way. When you react, you're dancing to someone else's music. They said something, you responded. They pulled the string, and you moved exactly as expected, like a puppet. But when you go silent, everything changes. Because now they're the ones waiting. Wondering, checking their phone, replaying the conversation in their head, questioning what went wrong, what you're thinking, what you're planning. And here's the part that'll make you smile once you see it. They start punishing themselves far worse than you ever could with words. I know what you're thinking, but I need to defend myself. I need to set the record straight. I need to... No, you don't. Because the truth? Most arguments aren't about truth at all. They're about ego. Control, getting a reaction out of you. And the moment you realize this, everything shifts. Affirmation moment. Say this with me right now. My silence is my strength. Again, my silence is my strength. One more time and mean it. My silence is my strength. Good. Now let's talk about why this works on a level that most people never understand. Hobbes talked about the state of nature, that constant war of all against all. But he also understood something crucial. The greatest power isn't in violence or noise. It's in the ability to withdraw that violence, to hold it back. When you stay silent, you're doing exactly that. You're showing restraint. And restraint, that's terrifying to people who've grown used to getting reactions out of you. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. Maybe it was a passive-aggressive comment. Maybe it was an outright insult. Maybe it's that thing they do where they disguise cruelty as just joking. You probably responded, right? And how did that go? Let me guess. They twisted your words, made you look emotional, irrational, too sensitive. Because that's the game. They poke, you react, they point at your reaction and say, "See, I knew you were crazy." But here's what happens when you don't play. They poke. Silence. They poke again, harder this time. Silence. Now they're confused, frustrated. They start saying things like, "Why aren't you talking to me?" Or "You're being childish," or my personal favorite, "I guess you have nothing to say." Wrong. You have everything to say. You're just smart enough not to waste it on someone who's playing games. Hobbes understood this when he wrote about consent and withdrawal of consent. You don't owe anyone your energy, your time, your emotional labor. Not your partner when they're being manipulative, not your boss when they're being disrespectful, not your family when they're crossing boundaries. Not anyone. Your attention is currency, and you've been spending it like it's worthless. Here's what I want you to do. Picture someone in your life right now, someone who always knows how to get under your skin, someone who pushes your buttons like they installed them. Got 'em? Now, imagine the next time they try their usual routine, you just don't respond. Not with anger, not with explanations, just nothing. Can you see their face? That confusion, that moment where their script breaks down because you're not following it anymore. That's power. Real power. The kind Machiavelli wrote about when he said it's better to be feared than loved. But I'd add one thing. It's even better to be unpredictable. And silence? That's the most unpredictable move you can make in a world where everyone's addicted to reaction. Because let's be honest about something. People have trained you. Like Pavlov's dogs, except instead of a bell and food, it's provocation and reaction. They learned that if they say this, you'll do that. If they push here, you'll crack there. And they've been using this knowledge against you for years. Your parents did it, your ex did it, your toxic friend does it, maybe even your current partner does it. They've mapped out your nervous system like it's Google Maps, and they know exactly which route to take to get you to explode. Until now. Because starting today, you are rewriting the entire algorithm. Montesquieu designed systems to prevent the abuse of power through separation, checks and balances. You are about to become your own system of checks and balances. When someone tries to provoke you, there's a check. When they expect a reaction, there's a balance. You, silent, unmoved, in complete control. Repeat after me. I choose my battles, and this isn't one of them. Say it again. I choose my battles, and this isn't one of them. Feel that? That's you taking your power back. Now I need to tell you something that might sting a little, but you need to hear it.
The reason your silence breaks people is because most of them are addicted to your attention. Not your love, not your respect, your attention. And when you cut off the supply, they go through withdrawal. Actual psychological withdrawal. Rousseau talked about the social contract, the unspoken agreements that hold society together. But there's another contract most people don't talk about, the narcissistic contract. Here's how it works. Certain people in your life have built their entire self-image on your reactions, your validation, your emotional responses. When they insult you and you get angry, that validates their power over you. When they ignore you and you chase them, that validates their worth. When they criticize you and you defend yourself, that validates their position above you. You've been signing this contract over and over, every single day, and you didn't even know it. But now you do. And here's the thing about contracts. You can break them. Not with announcements, not with drama. Just stop showing up to the negotiations. Tacitus, that brilliant Roman historian, wrote about emperors who ruled through fear and spectacle. But you know who lasted longest? The ones who mastered strategic silence. The ones who let their absence speak louder than their presence. Think about someone who ghosted you once. Not forever, just long enough. How did it make you feel? Exactly. That gnawing uncertainty, that desperate need to know what they're thinking. That compulsion to reach out, to fix it, to know where you stand. That's the power you're about to wield. Except you're going to use it consciously, strategically, not to be cruel, but to protect yourself. Here's what most people don't understand about dark psychology. It's not always about manipulation for selfish gain. Sometimes it's about using psychological principles to establish boundaries that people actually respect. You've probably tried the nice approach, right? Hey, I don't like it when you talk to me that way. Can we please have a conversation without the sarcasm? I feel hurt when you... And what happened? They either ignored it, mocked it, or did it even more because now they know it bothers you. So here's what you do instead. Nothing. The next time they overstep, silence. The next time they try to bait you, silence. The next time they demand an explanation you don't owe them, silence. And watch what happens. First, they'll think you didn't hear them, so they'll repeat it, louder. Still nothing from you. Now they're irritated. Are you ignoring me? Maybe you nod, maybe you don't, but you still don't engage. Now they're angry. This is so immature. I'm trying to talk to you. No, they're not. They're trying to get a reaction out of you. There's a difference. And you're finally smart enough to see it. So you stay quiet. And this is where it gets interesting. They start apologizing, backtracking. Look, maybe I came on too strong. Can we just talk? See that? Your silence did in 30 seconds what 6 months of arguments couldn't do. It created actual consequence. Because here's something Machiavelli knew that most people forget. People don't respect what they can always access. Not your time, not your energy, not your emotional bandwidth. When you're always available to be provoked, you train people that your boundaries are negotiable. But when you withdraw completely, suddenly your attention becomes valuable again. Say this out loud. My energy is precious, and I decide who receives it. Again, my energy is precious, and I decide who receives it. One more time with conviction. My energy is precious, and I decide who receives it. Good. Now let's go deeper, because I need you to understand the actual neurological mechanism that makes this work. When you argue with someone, you activate their amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fight or flight responses. You both get flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And here's the thing about that state. Nobody learns anything, nobody grows, nobody changes their mind. It's just two nervous systems screaming at each other. But when you go silent, you deny them that neurological release. The tension they created has nowhere to go, so it turns inward. They start questioning themselves, analyzing their behavior, wondering what they did wrong. This is what Hobbes meant when he talked about the sovereign power, the ultimate authority that can withdraw protection. When you withdraw your attention, you're withdrawing a kind of social protection, and people feel it viscerally. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but isn't this manipulative? Isn't this cruel? Let me ask you something. Is manipulation to have boundaries? Is cruelty to protect your peace? Is it wrong to stop participating in someone else's game? Because that's all this is. You're not punishing anyone. You're simply refusing to be punished anymore. There's a massive difference. Look, I get it. Silence feels unnatural at first, especially if you're someone who's always been the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who smooths things over. But here's what you need to understand. That role, it wasn't assigned to you by some cosmic force. You took it on because it was safer than confrontation, easier than establishing boundaries, less scary than being misunderstood. But it's been killing you slowly. Every time you bit your tongue to keep the peace, every time you explained yourself to someone who wasn't actually listening, every time you accepted blame for things that weren't your fault, you've been playing small. And the people around you, they've gotten very comfortable with that version of you. So when you suddenly go quiet, when you stop explaining, when you stop defending, they panic. Because the version of you they could control is gone, and they don't know what to do with this new version, this silent, observant, unmoved version. Let them panic. That's not your problem anymore. Francesco Guicciardini, Machiavelli's intellectual rival, argued for flexibility over rigid rules, and he was right about something. You have to read the room, know when to speak and when to stay silent. But here's where most people get it wrong. They stay silent out of fear. You're going to stay silent out of strategy. There's a massive difference. Fear-based silence is collapse, it's shutdown, it's I'm too scared to speak. Strategic silence is power, it's choice, it's I have nothing to prove to you. Can you feel the difference? One makes you smaller, the other makes you untouchable.
So let's talk about how this actually works in real life. Because theory is nice, but application is everything. Scenario 1. The chronic arguer. You know this person. Everything's a debate. Every conversation turns into a battle of who's right. They thrive on it. Your old response? Engage, defend, prove your point. Your new response? That's it. Just, and then nothing. They'll push. What does that mean? You? Nothing. Just thinking. Then silence. Watch how fast they spiral, because you've denied them the argument they were craving. You've refused to be the opponent in their mental boxing match, and without an opponent, they're just shadowboxing in an empty ring. Scenario 2. The guilt tripper. I guess I'm just a terrible person then. After everything I've done for you, I see how it is. I'm not important to you. Your old response? Panic, reassure, prove you care. Your new response? Silence. Complete, unwavering silence. Because here's what Locke understood about rights and consent. You don't owe anyone reassurance for manipulative behavior. You don't owe anyone comfort for their self-pity. You don't owe anyone validation for their guilt trips. When they try to make you responsible for their emotions, silence is the only appropriate response. And here's what'll happen. They'll escalate. So you're not even going to say anything? Still nothing. Wow, this tells me everything I need to know. Let it. Because what it actually tells them is that their old tactics don't work anymore, and that's exactly the message you want to send. Scenario 3. The public provocateur. This one's tricky. They insult you in front of others, trying to make you look bad or get a reaction that makes you look worse. Your old response? Defend yourself, which always makes you look defensive. Your new response? A slight smile, a knowing look, and nothing. This is what Carl Schmitt called the exception that proves the rule. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the refusal to make one. That smile? It says, I see what you're doing, and it's beneath me. That silence? It lets everyone else see it too. And here's the beautiful part. When you don't take the bait, the person who threw it out looks petty, small, desperate for attention. You didn't have to say a word. Your silence said everything. Repeat these words. I am not the narrator of someone else's story. Say it again. I am not the narrator of someone else's story. One more time. I am not the narrator of someone else's story. Feel that power? That's you stepping out of a role someone else wrote for you. Now let's talk about the aftermath, because silence isn't just about the moment, it's about what comes after. Here's what people don't tell you about going silent. It changes the entire dynamic permanently. Once you've shown that you can and will withdraw your attention, people treat you differently. They become more careful with their words, more respectful of your boundaries, more aware that you're not someone who can be taken for granted. Weber wrote about 3 types of authority: traditional, charismatic, and legal rational. But there's a 4th type he didn't quite name: silent authority. The authority that comes from people knowing you don't need to explain yourself, don't need to defend yourself, don't need to prove anything. You just are. And that's threatening to people who build their power on making others react. Think about the most powerful people you know. Not the loudest, not the most aggressive, the actually powerful ones. Notice something? They don't explain themselves constantly. They don't engage with every criticism. They don't feel the need to have the last word. They speak when it matters, and when it doesn't, they're quiet. Not because they can't respond, because they choose not to. And that choice is what makes them powerful. You're about to become one of those people. But here's where strategy comes in, because silence isn't a blanket policy. It's a tool, and like any tool, you need to know when and how to use it. You go silent when someone's trying to provoke you emotionally. Someone's fishing for information they haven't earned. Someone's testing your boundaries. Someone's playing games instead of communicating honestly. Someone's trying to make you responsible for their feelings. You don't go silent when someone's genuinely trying to understand you. Someone's showing actual vulnerability. Someone's taking responsibility for their actions. Someone's asking for help in good faith. The difference? Intent. And you know the intent. Deep down, you always do. You've just been taught to ignore your instincts and give everyone the benefit of the doubt, even when they've proven repeatedly that they don't deserve it. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But I'll tell you something better. It's best to be respected. And you gain respect not through force or manipulation or games, but through the simple, radical act of respecting yourself enough to stop engaging with disrespect. Say this with me. I trust my instincts about people's intentions. Again, I trust my instincts about people's intentions. One last time. I trust my instincts about people's intentions. Good. Because those instincts, they've been trying to protect you, and you've been overriding them to be nice. Stop. Now let's talk about what happens inside you when you start using strategic silence. Because this isn't just about changing how others treat you. It's about fundamentally changing how you see yourself. The first time you go silent when you want to scream, it feels like swallowing fire. Every cell in your body is screaming to respond, to defend, to explain. Your heart's racing, your hands might shake, you might even feel physically ill. And that's normal. Because you're breaking a pattern that's been reinforced for years, maybe decades. You're going against every instinct you've been trained to have. But here's what happens. You survive it. The moment passes. The other person moves on. The world keeps turning, and you realize something powerful. You didn't need to respond. Nothing terrible happened because you stayed quiet. In fact, something better happened. You kept your dignity. You kept your power. You kept yourself. The second time is easier. The third time, easier still. By the 10th time, you start to enjoy it. You start to feel the power of it. That moment when someone's trying so hard to get a rise out of you, and you just don't give it to them. It's like watching someone push against a door that's no longer there. They stumble, they fall, they look foolish. And you didn't have to do anything except stand still. Rousseau wrote about the general will, the collective good that transcends individual wants. But sometimes, the greatest good is simply refusing to participate in collective dysfunction. Your family has always fought like this? You don't have to. Your workplace thrives on drama. You don't have to feed it. Your friend group communicates through passive aggression. You don't have to speak that language. You can opt out. Not by leaving necessarily, but by simply not engaging with the dysfunction. By being present, but not participating. By observing, but not absorbing. And here's what's wild. Sometimes your silence alone is enough to shift the entire dynamic, because dysfunction requires participants. It needs people to react, to escalate, to keep the cycle going. When you remove yourself from that cycle, the whole thing can collapse. Or, at least, it can't pull you in anymore. I want you to think about something for a moment. How much energy have you wasted in your life trying to make people understand you? How many hours spent explaining your intentions? How many conversations rehashing the same arguments? How many sleepless nights replaying what you should have said? What if I told you that most of that energy was wasted? Not because you weren't right, not because your points weren't valid, but because the people you were talking to weren't actually listening. They were just waiting for their turn to speak. Or worse, they were actively looking for ammunition to use against you. Madison understood this when he helped design the American system of government. He knew that people are motivated by self-interest, that ambition must be made to counteract ambition. He didn't build a system based on people being good. He built a system based on people being people. And you need to approach your relationships the same way. Not cynically, but realistically. Some people in your life are good faith actors. They're genuinely trying to understand you, to connect with you, to build something mutual. Those people? Give them your words, your time, your energy. But others, they're playing a different game entirely. And the only way to win that game is not to play. Repeat after me. Not everyone deserves access to my inner world. Say it again. Not everyone deserves access to my inner world. Once more and really mean it. Not everyone deserves access to my inner world. There it is. That's the boundary most people never learn to draw. They give everyone equal access, equal time, equal explanation, and they wonder why they feel drained all the time. Here's something else that happens when you embrace strategic silence. You start to see people more clearly. Because when you're not busy reacting, you can actually observe. And what you see might surprise you. That person who always made you defend yourself, they do it to everyone. That friend who constantly needed reassurance, they're never satisfied no matter what you say. That family member who guilt-tripped you, it's their primary form of communication with everyone they supposedly love. It was never about you. You just happened to be a willing participant. And now, you're not. And that's going to bother some people. They might say you've changed, that you're different, cold, distant. Good. Let them say it. Because what they really mean is, you're not letting me use you anymore, and I don't like it. That's their problem, not yours. John Adams studied Machiavelli extensively because he understood something crucial. Power, unchecked, becomes tyranny. And that includes the power people have been exercising over your emotional state. When you go silent, you're implementing your own system of checks and balances. You're saying, you don't get unlimited access to provoke me anymore. You're establishing constitutional limits on how people can treat you. And those who respected you will understand. Those who were using you will be upset. Let that be your compass. The people who get angry when you set boundaries, they were benefiting from you not having any. Remember that.
Now I want to talk about something most people don't anticipate. What happens in the rest of your life when you start mastering strategic silence? Because this change doesn't stay contained, it spreads. Think about it like this. When you stop over-explaining yourself in one relationship, you stop doing it in all of them. When you stop taking responsibility for someone else's emotions once, you recognize the pattern everywhere. When you withdraw your attention from toxic dynamics, you suddenly see how many toxic dynamics you've been feeding. It's like putting on glasses for the first time. Suddenly, everything's in focus, and you can't unsee it. Your work relationships change. That boss who always implied you weren't doing enough, you stop defending your every move. You do your job well. You document your work, and when they make their little comments, silence. Not defensive, not apologetic, just silent confidence. And watch how quickly they start treating you like someone who knows their worth. Your family dynamics shift. Those holiday dinners where everyone digs at each other, you stop participating in the excavation. Someone makes a jab about your life choices, a small smile, a change of subject, or just nothing. No explanation, no justification, no playing the game. And suddenly, you're not the target anymore, because you've become boring to provoke. There's no reaction, no drama, no supply. So they move on to someone else. Your friendships evolve. The real ones get deeper because you're not wasting energy on surface-level drama anymore. The fake ones dissolve because they were built on dysfunction and gossip and mutual complaining. And that's okay. Actually, it's better than okay. It's necessary. Polybius wrote about the cycle of governments, how they rise and fall and rise again. Your relationships follow the same cycle. Some need to fall so better ones can rise. And your silence, it accelerates that natural process. It separates the wheat from the chaff, the people who respect you from the people who were just using your reactions for entertainment. Here's something else you'll notice. You become calmer. Not in a passive way, in a powerful way. Because you're not constantly flooded with cortisol from pointless conflicts. You're not lying awake replaying arguments. You're not having imaginary conversations with people who wronged you. Your nervous system finally gets to rest. And from that rest comes clarity, creativity, actual power. Weber talked about the iron cage of rationalization, how modern life traps us in rigid systems. But you know what one of those cages is? The cage of constant reaction. Always being on, always being available, always being ready to defend yourself. That's not freedom. That's a prison you've been living in so long you forgot what it felt like to be free. Strategic silence is the key. Not to escape human connection, but to escape the prison of being everyone's emotional punching bag. Say this with me. My peace is non-negotiable. Again, my peace is non-negotiable. One more time and feel it in your bones. My peace is non-negotiable. There. That's your new North Star. Not politeness, not being liked, not keeping the peace. Your actual peace. The kind that lives inside you and doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Now, I want to address something important. Some of you are thinking, but what if I go too far?
What if I become cold, distant, isolated? Valid concern. Here's the difference. Emotional unavailability comes from fear, from walls built to keep everyone out while letting authentic connection in. One is indiscriminate, the other is intelligent. One closes all doors, the other guards the ones that matter. You're not becoming heartless, you're becoming selective, and that's not the same thing at all. Leonardo da Vinci was Machiavelli's contemporary, and they both shared something: observational genius. The ability to watch, to analyze, to understand patterns before making a move. That's what you're developing now. You're learning to observe before reacting, to analyze intentions before engaging, to understand the game before deciding whether to play. And sometimes, most times, you'll decide the game isn't worth playing. That's not cold, that's wise. Here's where this gets really interesting. Once you master silence with toxic people, you can start using strategic communication with healthy people, because you'll finally have the energy for it. Think about how much bandwidth you've been wasting on people who don't matter, people who drain you, people who take and never give back. Now imagine redirecting all that energy towards people who actually deserve it. Your real friends, your supportive family members, your genuine connections. Suddenly you have so much more to give to them, not because you're forcing it, but because you're not hemorrhaging it everywhere else. Aristotle wrote about the golden mean, the perfect balance between extremes. You're finding that balance now. Not too open, not too closed, not too reactive, not too distant. Just intentional, strategic, in control. And that's when your life actually starts to change. Not because you've become someone else, but because you finally become yourself. The version of you that doesn't perform for people who don't appreciate it. The version of you that doesn't explain itself to people who've already made up their minds. The version of you that knows the difference between connection and codependency, between communication and constant defense, between being present and being prey. Repeat this truth. I attract what I respect in myself. Say it again. I attract what I respect in myself. One final time. I attract what I respect in myself. And when you respect yourself enough to be silent in the face of disrespect, you stop attracting disrespect. It's that simple and that profound. We're entering the final stage now. The place where strategic silence becomes not just a tool, but part of who you are. And I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't about never speaking. It's about speaking mattering. When every word isn't a defense, a justification, an explanation. When you're not using language to fill uncomfortable silences or prove your worth, then what you do say carries actual weight. People listen, because they know you don't waste words. Guicciardini said something that Machiavelli sometimes missed. Flexibility matters more than rigid rules. And he was right. Strategic silence isn't a formula you follow blindly. It's a principle you adapt to each situation. Sometimes silence means physically leaving. Sometimes it means staying present but not engaging. Sometimes it means a simple, I hear you, and then changing the subject. Sometimes it means cutting someone off entirely. The wisdom is knowing which response fits which situation. And that wisdom, it comes from practice, from paying attention to what works and what doesn't, from being honest with yourself about your motivations. Are you being silent because you're scared? That's avoidance. Are you being silent because you're done wasting energy on someone who won't change? That's strategy. Feel the difference? One contracts you, makes you smaller. The other expands you, makes you clearer. Let me be real with you for a moment. Some people aren't going to like this new version of you. They're going to test you, push harder, try to drag you back into old patterns. They might even escalate their behavior, thinking that if they just push the right button, you'll crack. And here's what you need to know. Let them try.
Because every time they push and you don't budge, you're reinforcing your new boundaries. You're training them and yourself that this is who you are now. Someone who doesn't engage with bullshit. Someone who doesn't explain themselves to people who aren't actually asking. Someone who knows that silence is sometimes the kindest thing you can offer someone who's determined to misunderstand you. Schmidt wrote about the friend-enemy distinction as fundamental to politics. But in personal life, there's a third category most people ignore: the irrelevant. Not everyone is your friend or enemy. Most people are just irrelevant to your actual life. And treating them as such, by not engaging with their provocations, their judgments, their attempts to pull you into their drama, that's not cruel. That's honest. You don't owe everyone a reaction. You don't owe everyone a relationship. You don't owe everyone access. The sooner you accept this, the freer you become. Say these words: I release the need to be understood by everyone. Again, I release the need to be understood by everyone. One more time, and let it sink in. I release the need to be understood by everyone. That's it. That's the final lock on the prison door. The need to be understood by people who have no intention of understanding you. Let it go. Here's what your life looks like 6 months from now if you commit to this. You wake up and you're not immediately anxious about checking your phone because you're not waiting for the next attack, the next guilt trip, the next test. You've established that those things don't work on you anymore. You go through your day, and when someone tries their usual manipulation, you feel it, you recognize it, and you simply don't participate. No anger, no explanation, just a calm, centered understanding that this isn't your circus and these aren't your monkeys. You come home and your space feels like yours again, because you're not carrying everyone else's emotional baggage. You've put it down, left it where it belongs, with them. And the most beautiful part? The people who truly matter, who truly love you, who truly respect you, they're still there. Probably closer than ever, actually, because you finally have the energy and space to nurture real connections instead of managing toxic ones. But I'd be lying if I told you this was easy. It's not. There will be moments when you'll want to break your silence, when someone will say exactly the thing designed to make you explode, and you'll feel that familiar rage, that desperate need to defend yourself, to make them understand. In those moments, remember this: your silence isn't about them. It's about you. It's about choosing yourself, your peace, your power. It's about refusing to let someone else's dysfunction determine your emotional state. And it's about understanding what Hobbes understood centuries ago. In the state of nature, life is nasty, brutish, and short. But you don't live in the state of nature. You live in a civilized world where you have choices, where you can choose not to engage in someone else's war, where you can choose to be sovereign over your own reactions, where you can choose silence. Livy wrote about the rise of Rome, and one thing he documented again and again: the victors weren't always the strongest or the loudest. They were the most patient, the most strategic, the ones who knew when to fight and when to withdraw. You're learning that wisdom now, not for conquest, not for manipulation, but for protection, for peace, for power over your own life. And that's a victory more profound than any argument you could win. Because here's the truth: you were never going to change those people with your words. They were always going to twist them, minimize them, turn them against you. But with your silence, you've changed yourself, and that changes everything. One last time, say this with me: I am the author of my own peace. Again, I am the author of my own peace. And once more, with everything you have, I am the author of my own peace. Good. Now hold on to that. So, here's where we are. You started this hour probably carrying some hurt, some frustration, some relationship or situation where you keep getting baited into reactions you regret. And now you have a weapon. Not a weapon to hurt others, a weapon to protect yourself. Strategic silence. The kind that Machiavelli would approve of, that Hobbes would understand, that Montesquieu would recognize as a check on abusive power. The kind that's rooted in wisdom, not weakness, in choice, not fear, in self-respect, not arrogance. Starting tomorrow, when someone tries to provoke you, and they will try, I want you to remember everything we talked about. The psychology of why silence works, the practical strategies for deploying it, the transformation it creates in you. And I want you to stay quiet. Not forever, not with everyone, just with the people who've proven they don't deserve your words. And watch what happens. Watch them scramble, watch them spiral, watch them finally face themselves without your reactions to hide behind. And watch yourself. Watch yourself staying calm, staying centered, staying in control. Watch yourself reclaiming your power one silent moment at a time. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift inside you during this hour, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because we're going to keep diving into these truths that most people are too afraid to say out loud. This isn't just content. This is a movement of people who are done being emotional punching bags, done explaining themselves to people who aren't listening, done participating in dynamics that drain them. You're part of that movement now. And here's the thing, your silence is going to break them in ways your anger never could. Not because you're trying to break them, but because you're finally done breaking yourself to accommodate them. Welcome to the other side. Welcome to your power. Welcome to the rest of your life. Now go be silent, strategically, powerfully, unapologetically, and watch your world transform.